Hello and welcome back to Lorcana Villain. My name is Baker, and today I've got two separate sets of top 8 deck lists to go through with all of you. These are from two events that both took place on the 1st of June. So one of them was in France, which I'm a couple of days late on reporting on. Those deck lists have been available for a couple of days. Thank you to inkdecks.com for being a fantastic source of information on where these deck lists have come from. And then there was another event on the 1st of June where the lists only went live earlier today. The one where the information came in this morning, which was from somewhere in America, I'm not sure where exactly, but hosted by Red Saber Games and had 43 players. And then the other event, somewhere in France, I'm not sure exactly where, but had 128 players. So two pretty respectable fields, and I'm glad to see, again, a fairly diverse meta. So I want to jump straight in, but first a shout out to the channel sponsors, Cardmarket. If you're looking for singles at very competitive rates, then check out Cardmarket. I'm also an affiliate for Dragon Shield, so if you like Dragon Shield products such as sleeves, even custom card sleeves, which you can get, deck boxes, play mats, a host of things, you can use my affiliate link, which is linked down below, and code VILLAIN5 for 5% off your purchase. But without further ado, let's jump straight in. We're going to start off with our France event, so 128 players, big old field, and first place was taken by some Ruby Sapphire control. So this Ice Block Sisu package becoming an absolute staple in this Ruby Sapphire decks. Obviously the Ice Block being a 1-drop uninkable item which we can exert to choose a character, and that chosen character gets -1 strength, which is great just for fixing math so that we can challenge into them and potentially not be taken out ourselves. But obviously we've got item synergy in general. We've got Flavisham here to draw us a lot of cards. We've got Tamatoa here who's going to get additional lore for each item on the board, and of course he can recycle items. And Ice Block going to work in a lot of ways. It works with Brawl. We can get more characters into this 2 strength or less margin that Brawl needs them to be, and same as Sisu has. When she comes out, we banish all opposing characters with 2 strength or less. So again, Ice Block going to help us get more characters into that range, and just a really strong ability because it gets around things like Ward. It's just a one-sided board wipe, again, for the characters that have 2 strength or less. So lovely. To fill out the items, we've also got the 4 Porpsicle to draw cards standard. We've got the 4 Fishbone Quill to help us ramp big, and 2 Lucky Dime as a nice game ender or just a way to catch up. You can really fall behind with this deck in terms of lore, and then just have a couple of real huge catch-up turns courtesy of Dime, normally alongside Tamatoa. So great. We are running 2 copies of the Emboldened Warrior Sisu, the 3-cost inkable, 1/4 quest for 2, and she gets an extra 1 strength for each card in the opponent's hand. Just good as a more early game presence, and gives us something to respond to the a lot of Ruby Amethyst decks of moving towards the Flynn Rider, who you gain 3 lore if you have the character with the highest strength on the board at the beginning of your turn. So Sisu is going to help us combat that a little bit. Obviously it's kind of play draw dependent, but Sisu at least going to hopefully give us some early ball presence, and again she is a shift target for our Floodborn. We've got Grandma Talas for the draw, Maui for some nice ball control, 4 copies of Madame Medusa, again someone else who can benefit from the Ice Block from us lowering strength, so even more characters fall into the range of that terrible woman. Obviously the Tamatoas, as I said. 4 Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, again we're ramping, so we should have access to this at a reasonable point in the game, and just hard removal, a body which is going to demand a response, and 2 lore is not bad to work alongside Lucky Dime. We've got 4 Develop Your Brain to help us find key pieces, ramp in the form of 1 Jump Ahead and How Far I'll Go, and 2 copies of Be Prepared. So yeah, a pretty standard shell for Ruby Sapphire. A few count differences, and some people are playing with things like the Scar or like Be King Undisputed, and like, again, slightly different counts, but generally a shell that is proving itself over and over again to be one of the best decks in the meta. So congratulations to them. Next up in top 4, we have Clement, also on the Ruby Sapphire control. Max counts of absolutely everything, which I do really like. But 4 Lucky Dime, I don't know, just feels like a lot to me. I feel like 3 is, the standard tends to be 2. I feel like there's an argument for 3 because it is an important piece and you want to see it. But yeah, 4, really heavy count, and they're cutting out on a shift target for our Floodborn Sisu. We don't see either of the 3 drops. So we're just playing this Sisu for a hard 8, which again is not the end of the world. We're ramping, so we should have access to it nice and quickly. Max out on the Ice Blocks, but yeah, it looks really nice and consistent. I just don't know if you need the 4 Dime, as much as I like all 4s. Yeah, interesting, but led them to top 4, so congratulations to them. And also in top 4 is another Ruby Sapphire deck, definitely the dominating ink combination at this particular event. But yeah, a couple of like tech choices here. We are running 2 copies of the Daring Visitor Sisu, who when she's played, we banish a character with 1 strength or less, which there are already a fair amount of characters that already fit fit that, but of course, with our ice blocks, we can bring more things into range. And she's got evasive, and so potentially you could sit there and cheat out some lore, and again, is a shift target for the 3 copies of the empowered sibling Sisu that we're running. We're also running 3 copies of Scuttle, 2-cost Ingable, 1/3, quest for 1, and when you play him, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, choose an item that you find and put it into your hand. So definitely not, we're not seeing Scuttle in many of the Ruby Sapphire lists, but it pops up every now and again, and I do like the Scuttle just to help you find the Fishbone Quill, which I think in so many matchups is such an important piece to have for the turn 3 to really get cooking. And of course, as the game goes on, it can help you find your lucky dime when you need it, or just if you just need any item to work with Flavisham perhaps. So yeah, I like the inclusion of Scuttle. Everything else pretty standard. A lot of these Ruby Sapphire players moving away from Lady Tremaine, which I think is fine. 2B prep in here, 3 1 jump, 2 how far I'll go, 3 ice blocks, but yep, that's good. Congratulations to them. And our last Ruby Sapphire list of this event, we have Gregory in top 8, choosing to run both the different Sisus, 2 copies of the Daring Visitor to pick off 1 strength or less characters, and 1 copy of the Emboldened Warrior for a bit more board presence, a bit more of an aggressive quester, and yeah, hopefully she's got enough strength to help us against things like Flynn or just control the board a bit more. We're also seeing 3 copies of the Scuttle to help us find items in the early game and finding the dime when we want to see it. 3 copies of the Floodborn Sisu, again, just for Medusa, no Tremaine in here. Just 3 copies of Tamatoa. I do think this is such an important piece. I personally don't think I'd ever run less than 4, but did well for Gregory, getting top 8. We're also seeing 1 copy of the Shield of Virtue, which pops up every now and again. The ability to you exert and pay 3 to ready a chosen character, which can come in useful, help us keep Flavisham safe maybe, or just any of our characters. So that can come in useful, but more than anything, it's just another 1-drop item to help fuel Flavisham or to give Tamatoa extra lore. Because you really want your 1-drop to be an item, and if we miss Porpsicle, then it kind of feels bad, so it just gives us better odds at getting an item down on turn 1. 3 ice block, 2 lucky dime, everything else pretty standard, so congratulations to Gregory. So yeah, Ruby Sapphire doing particularly well in this event, but the Squirrel certainly made his presence felt as well. In second place, we have Swan playing Emerald Steel, Bucky discard. So the bane of the format at the moment, definitely the center point of the most discourse among Lorcana fans. Should Bucky be banned? Let me know in the comments. I'll talk about it at some point. Not today. I don't want to get sidetracked, but let me know down in the comments politely. Like, you can disagree with people and still be polite. It's not that hard. But yeah, let me know. Do you think Bucky should be the first card banned? I'd love to have a look through comments before I discuss it myself. But whether or not you think he should be banned, you must admit Bucky is putting in an awful lot of work this meta, and I think I'll do. The biggest contributor to that is he was always okay, but the fact that we have 3-drop Floodborns, and I know we technically did in the past, we can shift into Robin Hood on turn 3, and there might be one other way of doing it, but just, we've got more now. We've got 3 copies of this Aladdin, which is great removing items. That's going to help us against quills, dimes, things like that, and then the fact that our other 3-drop Floodborn is Diablo Devoted Herald, who just demands an answer. Yes, there are a lot of things that can answer him, but if he just sits there and for even a turn or 2, then it's going to generate you so much advantage during each opponent's turn. Whenever they draw a card, while this card is exerted, you may draw a card. But we've seen a lot of these lists also playing the 1-drop Diablo, so we have that shift option open to us from turn 2 to make our opponent start discarding from turn 2. Not seeing that in this deck. We are seeing the 4/4 Pegasus line, the baby being really good in and of itself, just cheating out early lore, and again it gives us that line of 1-drop, turn 2 Bucky, turn 3 shift into the Floodborn Pegasus, who again he's evasive, questing for 2, 3/3, he's fine, and it's another early line to of course sing Grab Your Swords, or we don't talk about Bruno, which we're running 2 of each. We are also running the 4/4 Robin Hood line, again a quick Floodborn line, a way for us to sing songs, and just Robin Hood, just a really stellar character. We've got just 3 copies of the Ursa Deceiver to snipe songs, which I think is fine. You're making them discard so much, like 9 times out of 10, they've got an empty hand by turn 4 or 5 anyway. Like, I still think it's right to run copies of this, but I think 3 is fine. Yeah, sounds good. One difference we are seeing in this deck is the Prince John. Now, only really a difference in this format. In the past, you always see Prince John with Bucky, but the first few Bucky decks we were seeing weren't opting to play this Prince John, just really doubling down on all the discard stuff. And of course, we are running Beast Tragic Hero in this deck, which most Bucky decks have been running, because it's also with a Floodborn, as well as the potential draw power. But yeah, Swan deciding to take advantage of the Prince John. Whenever our opponent discards one or more cards, we draw for each card discarded. And we are also seeing the Ursa Deceiver of All, incredibly powerful singer. When she sings a song, we get to play it twice and then return that song to the bottom of the deck. So that's double Let the Storm Rage on, so 2 ping twice and then draw 2 cards, or Strength for a Raging Fire just to get up to some really nice high numbers. So Ursa putting in a lot of work. We're also seeing 4 copies of Sudden Chill, so even more discard. I don't know if you need all of this. I mean, hey, clearly it's fine. And you just double down on the amount of lines that you have to make our opponent discard. Like, I suppose if we miss Bucky, but we do get the 3-drop Ursa, then it just gives us another line to be able to, like, really aggressively make them discard. So yeah, just really doubling down on all these annoying cards. We're also seeing 2 copies of Flynn Rider, his own biggest fan. No shift target in this particular deck, but just a great card. He's fairly again, he's a Floodborn, so he triggers Bucky, and once our opponent's hand is empty, he quests for so much. Whether you're behind and you need to catch up, or you just need to close the gap, Flynn Rider will get you there. 3 copies of Dreadnought, great stats and drawing cards as king. We talked about these 5-cost songs, but we're also seeing 1 copy of A Fandom, A Flattenum, the 4-cost inkable song, banish all items. So really strong against Sapphire decks, whether with Steel or with Ruby. Again, if you can get just 1 lucky dime hit from this is fine, but if you can hit a dime and a Pawp, or a dime and a Pawp and an Ice Block, like anything 2+, I feel like you got value from this, and sometimes it can be a lot more than 2. So I like the addition. We'll see it again. So yeah, Bucky once again here to ruin everybody's day, but let's on to second place, so congratulations to them. Moving to top 8, we have Joseph with some Bucky discard. They are opting to run the 1-drop Diablo, Maleficent Spy. When you play this character, you can look at your opponent's hand, so we do have that option for turn 1 Diablo, turn 2 Bucky, turn 2 shift Diablo by discarding an action. So obviously that's really aggressive. We're also seeing 2 copies of Cursed Merfolk, which hasn't been making its way into many of these Emerald Steel decks in this format, but finding a place here. So just that little bit more aggression from this deck, either early game or just being able to flood the field in the mid game a little bit more to like up the post grab your swords to really just close that gap and push for game. We're seeing the Deceivers of All, just 2 copies of the Aladdin, Brave Rescuer, 2 copies of Flynn once again in this deck, 3 Jafar seems to be the standard count, just a 3/3 of the Pegasus line, which I think is fine. They needed to find room for not only these Cursed Merfolk, but very interestingly, 2 copies of Ariel, Sonic Warrior, 6-cost inkable, 3/8, quest for 2. Shift is irrelevant. To be fair, I was about to say she came up in a Steel Amber song list the other day, which I thought was pretty good. But I actually think I remember maybe she did come up in a Bucky deck as well, because I remember seeing a Bucky deck and then seeing this Ariel and saying that I feel like you'd want to play Morph. If you were going to do this, especially because you got 3 Tink as well. I definitely think I'd want this deck to play Morph. But yeah, this Ariel, outside of Medusa, she's really hard to remove, big and bulky. And yeah, whenever we play a song, we can pay 2 to do 3 damage. So nice for board clears and popping off targets. 3 Tinkerbell, as I said. We're again seeing the 4 Sudden Chill. Seeing 2 copies of I Find Him, I Flatten Him. So yeah, I'm a fan. That's probably the count I would go with. No Strength for a Raging Fire is certainly interesting. We're on 3 Bruno, 2 Swords, 4 Storm Rage on. Yeah, I feel like I'd want at least a couple of copies of Strength for a Raging Fire in here. But then again, I suppose with Ariel, maybe you don't need it as much. I don't know. I feel like if I'm running Ariel, that's more reason for me to want to play Strength for a Raging Fire. I don't know. I'd have to test the list, but did very well for Joseph, so congratulations to them. And our final Emerald Steel Bucky list for this top 8, we've got Olivia. Once again, also running the 1-drop Diablo, full 4 copies. Less tech stuff going on here. Although, just noticed the Hidden Cove. Although, is that a tech at this point? I feel like it's, I mean, it is. It's anti-meta. I really like this Hidden Cove. 1 cost inkable location, 1 to move there, 6 willpower, no passive lore gain. And characters here get +1 strength and willpower. I really like this. This is going to really fix maths for a lot of things. Like even a lot of these characters with 2 willpower, like Diablo and Robin Hood, like potentially being able to keep them out of Baboon range, grab your swords range, keep Bucky out of Tinkerbell range. There's so much math that you fix here. And again, giving yourself extra strength as well maybe sometimes allows you to be a bit more aggressive to opposing board states. I really like these Hidden Coves. I'm still to try this style of Bucky deck with Steel. But I think when I do, this will definitely be something I lean into. We are seeing the Ursa Deceiver of All, the full song package, but no Grab Your Sword. So not the full song package, Baker. Yeah, I think Grab Your Swords is important for the mirror, personally. But we're not seeing it here, but we're seeing full counts of Strength and Storm, 3 Brunos, 4 Jafar Dreadnought, only 1 Flynn Rider, 1 copy of Brinch John. Yeah, I think that's fine. Just one, just in here. It's not always necessary, but if you do get a convenient point in the game, then I think that's pretty good. 4 copies of the Brave Rescuer. Yeah, looks really nice. I especially like this Counter Cove. I just feel like I'd want at least, for me, probably 2 swords in here. But yeah, really like it. Congratulations to them. And our final top 8 list for this event, we do have some Steel Amber songs that made it through a very heavy Ruby Sapphire and Bucky discard field. We're not playing any flutes, but of course, songs really good for this deck. We've got Ariel, who's going to help to find these songs and sing them for cheap. Cinderella Ballroom Sensation is going to be able to sing the ones that are 3 cost less nice and early with her Singer 3. And of course, we've just got some really nice shift lines to be able to sing things like Whole New World, Grab Your Swords, Along Came Zeus, nice and early when we need to. We're running 3 copies of the new Ursula Vanessa, who's Singer 4, so that gets Along Came Zeus online even earlier. We're not running any Sing Together songs, but that's fine. We're also running 3 copies of the Floodborn Ursula, Eric's Bride, 4 cost uninkable, 2/4 quests for 2. You shift onto your baby Ursula by discarding a song card, so plenty of those, so we should have this online fairly regularly. And Vanessa's Design, whenever this character quests, chosen opponent reveals their hand and discards a non-character card of your choice. So it's Bare Necessities on a body. We are also running 2 copies of Bare Necessities, but lovely to have this on a body. We could potentially use it every turn if they're not able to answer Ursula. And of course, she's questing for 2, which is pretty nice. I mentioned these nice early shift lines, 4/4 Robin Hood and 4/4 Queen line. And that Queen line is also going to help us get this World's Greatest Criminal Mind online. Already a few targets for this: Tamatoa, Maui, Maleficent, Cinderella Stouthearted. But yeah, with the Queen's ability to manipulate strength, we can get even more online. We are running 3 copies of the Stouthearted Cinderella, which can obviously shift upon our shift onto our 1 cost, and great synergy with songs. Singing Sword, whenever you play a song, this character may challenge ready characters. A really rare ability in Lorcana, as it should be, and really, really strong. And she's just so hard to remove. 5/5 stat line, questing for 3 and resist 2, so really strong. But we're also seeing, once again, 2 copies of the Aerial Sonic Warrior, 6 cost. We've already talked through this this particular card, but yeah, I really like it in this deck in particular. It's definitely growing on me. I definitely overhyped this card when I first saw it, and then by the time the meta actually started and the set was released, I was really off her. I was like, I actually feel like I'm not a fan of her anymore. But the more I'm seeing her pop up in lists, I do quite like this Ariel. Just it's again, without outside of Medusa, she's so hard to remove. So yeah, big fan of that. Going through the rest of the songs, obviously I mentioned Bare Necessities and Criminal Mind. 4 Storm, 4 Strength, 4 Zeus. I like the 4 Zeus. I've always said I like a high count of Zeus. I think 3 or 4 is fine. 2 I find in my Platinum, so this card really finding its place in the meta in a lot of steel decks, deciding that it is worth the inclusion in helping your matchups into red-blue or blue-blue steel, and then the 4 Whole New World to Grab Your Sword. So yeah, love it. Really glad to see Steel Amber song list did do well. It makes sense. It should have a good Bucky matchup. So yeah, I feel like that should keep the meta going, because Bucky is has such a chokehold on the meta to a degree, but it doesn't at the same time, because like Steel Song should have a good Bucky, so that raises the amount of Steel Song, and the more Steel Song you're seeing, then you can warrant other things like Ruby Amethyst. I think has a pretty good Steel Song depending on the build, and again play draw dependent in a lot of cases. But yeah, glad to see Steel Song doing well. We'll move to our other event at Red Saber Games, 43 players. Now, this top 8 decided to do a complete split. They didn't play out their top cut, so we're just going to be going through the top 8 list. But again, we've just been through a lot of these. But we'll start off with this player who's playing Emerald Steel Bucky. Once again, we're seeing the 3 copies of the 1-drop Diablo, still the 4/4 Pegasus and the 4/4 Robin Hood. Just 1 copy of Along Came Zeus making its way into this build. 2 Grab Your Swords, 3 We Don't Talk About Bruno, all in on 4 Tink. Yeah, looks really good. 4 Tragic Hero Beast. Not a lot much more to say really, but yeah, looks good, looks consistent. Congratulations to them. And our only other Bucky discard list in this particular tournament for top 8, we've got Zach. With a couple of bits of spice though. A few bits of spice, actually, the more I look at the list. First of all, we're seeing the new Hey Hey. What's the subnet? Bumbling Rooster. 3-cost Inkable, 2/3, quest for 2, and fatten you up. When you play this character, if an opponent has more cards in their inkwell than you may put the top card of your deck into your inkwell face down and exerted. So it is ramp for Emerald, which is a first. And yeah, it's a really interesting card. Something to note is that if you are on the draw, so you're going second, yes, you go into your turn 3 with them at 3 ink, assuming they've inked every turn and that you've inked every turn. Then on your turn 3, you have to ink up to 3 to play this, so you no longer fit the conditions of being able to ramp. So at the earliest you can put this down is turn 4, but hey, sometimes that's still going to be useful. And he quests for 2, so yeah, I don't know if it's right, but it's certainly interesting and I'm glad to see it. We're also seeing 2 copies of Helga Sinclair, 5-cost uninkable, 4/4, quest for 2. Shift 3 is irrelevant, we do not have a morph in here. And then the ability, this changes everything. Whenever this character quests, you may deal 3 damage to chosen damaged character. So it's another Floodborn. It can only ever be a 5-drop because we can't shift. But yeah, the ability to do ping every turn. Again, I don't know if it's right, but it's certainly interesting and did well for Zach at this event, so well done to them. 5 Tinkerbells, I'm just noticing that for the first time. That would definitely be wrong. Does that mean that we're missing a card? No, shouldn't be. This deck is 62 cards, so yeah, take off a tink. 2 copies of Baboon, yep, fine. But the real spice is the 2 copies of Pack Tactics. 4-cost inkable action, gain 1 lore for each damage character opponents have in play. So if our opponent has made a nice wide board and they've taken damage, whether because they challenged into us, we challenged into them. Obviously we've got Ping, Tinkerbell, Storm, Strength, Helga. So lots of ways of doing this, and yeah, if there's enough of a board with damage on them, then you could potentially get 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 lore at a time with this. So again, I don't know if it's right, but it's really interesting, and it makes me smile to see it do well. So huge congratulations to Zach. We also have 2 Ruby Sapphire decks in this top 8. This build opting to play 4 copies of the Daring Visitor Sisu. So I'm expecting... I was looking for ice blocks there. There are no ice blocks here. So yeah, there will still be targets for this Sisu. If you're not running ice blocks, personally, again, it's a shift target for this big Sisu, but... I feel like I would just play the inkable one that gets more strength based on cards in opponent's hand. Because again, there are some targets for this, but yeah, certainly interesting. Items in general, we've got 4 Pork, 4 Quill, 2 Dime. We're on the full 4 Be Prepared. The 3 Sisu in Empowered Sibling. Yeah, everything else looks clean. We're seeing 3 Belle in this list. She's not always popping up in these Ruby Sapphire lists. Yeah, personally, this is the only thing I really question. If you're not running the ice blocks, then again, there'll be some targets, and it is a shift target, but I feel like I would just play the inkable one. But nonetheless, congratulations to Charles. And our other Ruby Sapphire list in this top 8, a different Zach. No shift target for the Sisu, which again, I think is fine. You should have access to this at a reasonable point in the game because we're ramp. Anything out of the ordinary here? We are running 2 copies of McDuck Manor, which isn't popping up that much these days. 4-cost inkable location. 1 to move there is irrelevant for this deck, but 9 willpower and 2 passive lore gain. So definitely demands an answer and can really net you a lot of lore. We are seeing 3 ice blocks here, 4 Brawl, 2 B Prep. Yep, pretty standard stuff. Again, no Tremaines. But yeah, looks good. Congratulations to Zach. Next up, we have some Sapphire Steel to look at, which you love to see. We've got 4 copies of, let's start with our 1-drops. No characters that are 1-drop. Just the 4 Porpsicle and the 4 Fortisphere to just let us draw a card. And then, as we've said before, the synergy with things like Flavisham. And there are no Tamatoas in here, but we are seeing 2 Aerials. So she's going to benefit from having a lot of items on the board. We've got Mr. Smear as our 2-drop. Just great stats, great questing. You love to see it. 3 Mickeys for some extra ramp. We've got 2 Bells here for some aggressive questing in the late game after we've got at least 10 in our Inkwell, and works really, really well with Lucky Dime. 4 Cogsworth to be one of our singers. singers, hard to remove because of ward, resist 1 to all our characters, really upsets our opponent's math, so you love to see it. 3 copies of Chin Pao, making his way into a few decks recently, just with such a fantastic stat line. 4/7 is out of Medusa range, is out of Along Came Zeus range, and Bodyguard, and again, it's a 5-cost character to sing our songs, so you love to see it. 4 copies of Tinkerbell. We've got 2 Hades for some more removal, along with the 2 Let It Go is going to help us answer things like Cinderella Stouthearted and Tamatoa, who's really bulky and hard to remove, even things like opposing Chen Pao's. We're seeing the 2 Simba, who popped up at the DLC in Atlanta, 7-cost Inkable, 5/7, so again, great stat line, is out of Medusa, out of Zeus. Quest for 2, and the ability, when you play this character and whenever he banishes another character in a challenge, you may choose one of these abilities. Either draw 2 and discard 2, which is good, we're filtering through, we're finding the pieces that we need, or we can deal 2 damage to chosen character. So that second ability is basically the same as a Tinkerbell, where if you banish a character, you do 2 ping to something. So yeah, finding its home in a lot more Sapphire Steel decks. 2 copies of Tamatoa, 2 Baboon. We are seeing the 1 copy of Avalanche, 4-cost uninkable action, deal 1 damage to each opposing character. You may banish chosen location. I really like this addition to Sapphire Steel, not only as a quick way to help defend yourself a bit more against Bucky, but again, it's location removal. You could run Rise of the Titans, which is obviously inkable, but this obviously being a bit more diverse, because you really want to remove the Queen's Castle is the main target really, which whenever I've played Sapphire Steel, if I have early castles, then they just can't do anything about it a lot of the time. They have Zeus, but sometimes that's just not enough. And then, yeah, 3 Zeus, 2 Let It Go, just 3 copies of A Whole New World, 3 Grab Your Swords, and we've talked about the items. So, yeah, glad to see Sapphire Steel not completely dead in the water this format, so congratulations to Robbie. Okay, sorry, I just looked at my Streamlabs and realised that my video is all out of sync. I did just a quick restart to see if that fixed it, and it hasn't, so I need to dive deeper into that later and get that fixed. But for now, because we're just so close to the end, I'll just finish the rest of this coverage just with voice. We've got 3 decks left to look at. First of all, we've got some EA Tempo, just win the game. I'm glad to get to say that again. It's been a while. EA Tempo not really performing very well so far in set 4 meta. Of course, it's still early days. It may still find its feet, but yeah, Evan leading it to a top 8. For our 1-drops, we've got the 4 Cursed Merfolk, which of course is what we want to see in this type of deck. Also 3 copies of Flynn Rider with the same effect to make our opponent discard, and just a really cheap aggressive quester. 2 Rafiki to help us combat the board a little bit more. We are running a 4/2 Pegasus line, which I think is great. Again, just the baby in this list is really strong. If they don't have an evasive answer to deal with this, then you can pump out a lot of lore. And again, Pegasus, again, if they don't have the Medusa or certain answers, then it's just a really strong card to have, and it gives you early access to the 3 copies of We Don't Talk About Bruno that we're running. So you'll love to see it. For our Merlin and Mim package, we've got the 4 Snake, 4 Fox, 3 Crab. You'll love to see it. 4 Goat and 4 Rabbit. So maximizing all of our bounce mechanics. We've got 4 copies of Ursa to snipe opposing songs. We are running 2 copies of Diablo, Devoted Herald. No shift target and no Bucky here to work with, but still just inherently a really, really strong card. If they don't have an answer, it's going to draw us an awful lot of cards. We've got 2 copies of Kick Cloud Kicker. Just as good as it always was, really. Helps to offset tempo for our opponent. They're Flynn Riders, both the Emerald and the Ruby ones. The Pegasus, opposing Diablos, Ursa, Deceiver of All. There's lots of targets for this, so you love to see it. We are running 3 copies of Deceiver of All ourselves, who's going to be singing 4 copies of Friends on the Other Side and 2 copies of Mother Knows Best, so some great targets for her to generate a lot of advantage of. We're also seeing 2 copies of the new Cricky, Lucky Cricket, 5-cost inkable, 3/4 quest for 1, and when you play this character, your other characters get +3 strength this turn, so very similar to Crab, but it's all of your characters and only on play, but great. The stat line's okay. Again, hates to see Medusa, but outside of Medusa, 4 is not bad, and questing for 3 is great, so you love to see it. And we're running 2 copies of Ursula, Sea Witch Queen. 7-cost inkable Floodborn, you can shift for 5. 4/7 stat line, which again, great, out of Medusa, out of Zeus. Quest for 3 and 2 abilities. Now, I am the ruler. Whenever this character quests, exert chosen character, so help us offset our opponent's board a little bit more, especially if we've got some bigger beat sticks like Rafiki, Madam Mim Fox, anything alongside Crab or Cricky, or even Merlin Goat to help us hit bigger numbers. And you'll listen to me. Other characters can't exert to sing songs. And we have a couple of shift lines here. We've got the 2-drops. Ursas and the 3-drop Ursas. So you can get this online potentially quite quickly. And against Steel Song decks or even Sapphire Steel decks, that's potentially really going to limit the plays they would like to make to really gain momentum the way those decks like to. So I really like this edition, and we're also seeing 2 copies of the Queen's Castle. Good as ever. 4-cost inkable location, 1 to move there, 7 willpower, 2 passive lore gain, and at the start of your turn, for every character you have at the Queen's Castle, you draw a card. So just incredibly strong, not only in generating lore, but just regenerating card advantage. It demands an answer. Really, really strong. So yeah, really great to see some EA Tempo do well in this event, because again, we've not seen it for a while. So congratulations to Evan. And another thing that I am thrilled to see do well in top 8, run by Jeffrey, we have some Ruby Amber Mufasa. So it's been a while since we talked about Mufasa, so for the benefit of newer players, Mufasa is a 5-cost inkable character, 3/3 stat line, quest for 2, and the sun will set when this character is banished. Reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character card, you play that character for free. They enter play exerted. Otherwise, put it on the top of your deck. So I've been a big fan of Mufasa since his release in Season 2. Hasn't done much so far this season, but again, season is very, very new. But yeah, as is the tradition, we're not playing a lot of non-character cards. A lot of Mufasa decks opting to play none. Some opting for a couple, and this deck is playing 4 copies of Brawl, which I do think is a good choice for Diablo, if nothing else. But again, lots of other targets for that. We're running 4 copies of Pluto, Exert, pay 1 less ink for the next character you play this turn. So this opens up some really funky lines early on. It's another way for us to just play our characters cheaper right off the bat. You can open yourself up an early Mother Gothel Rapunzel line if the Pluto remains untouched. Again, like if they don't put down a 1-drop characters, like a lot of decks are just running items as their 1-drop. So potentially Pluto can get a lot of advantage of. We're not running any copies of Doc, but we are running 4 copies of Gaston, 3-cost uninkable character, 2/4, quest for 1, and Dubious Recruitment. Exert, pay 2 less for the next character you play this turn. So if you play Gaston on 3, then from 4 you could potentially play 6 drops, of which we're running 2 copies of Hydra. Whenever this character is dealt damage, deal that much to chosen opposing character, which is a really strong card against any deck that wants to use ping damage on us. We're doing it back, or even just if they challenge Hydra, we're doing damage to a different character. If we challenge one of their exerted characters, we can then do damage to one of their readied ones. So yeah, I like the Hydra. 1 copy of Tremaine for some removal, and 3 Medusa for even more removal. We're also running the Mulan line. 4 copies of the 1-drop, Injured Soldier, Battle Wound. This character enters play with 2 damage. So not only is she a target for our Floodborn, but it's another way to get our Rapunzel online, and that often ends up being such an important part of your curve with this deck, because we don't have a lot of ways to draw cards. A lot of Ruby Amber decks opting to run Surfer Stitch. This person isn't. So we are pretty much all in on Rapunzel. We do have 2 copies of Pongo. Once per turn, pay 2 ink. Reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character, we put it into our hand. So again, we have mostly characters, so this should be a hit more often than not. We also have Julieta Madrigal. When you play this character, remove up to 2 damage from a chosen character, yours or your opponent's. And if you did do that, you may draw a card. So we have a couple of passive draw cards here, but Rapunzel really is where we want to generate a lot of advantage. And normally she, in the past, she's always got that off of Mother Gothel, who enters play with 3 damage counters. But Mulan could be another way of doing it, especially if we're playing decks who are running a lot of these things like Fire the Cannons, Baboom, just ways to shoot off these characters before we get a chance to play Rapunzel. Obviously, it's great if we can play this character and then immediately play Rapunzel, especially if we're utilizing things like Gaston and Pluto. We could potentially do that early on, but still, it's nice to have multiple lines to do it. So this Mulan going to help with that, and of course it's a shift target for the Floodborn Mulan. Elite Archer, 6-cost inkable, 5 to shift, 2/6 stat line, quest for 2, and 2 abilities. We have Straight Shooter. When you play this character, if you used shift to play her, she gets +3 strength, so she becomes a 5/6 statted character, and Triple Shot. During your turn, whenever this character deals damage to another character in a challenge, deal the same amount of damage to up to 2 chosen characters. So in a perfect world, we are going to shift this on top of our baby Mulan, making her a 5/6 statted character, and then we're going to be challenging into something, doing 5 damage to that thing, and then also doing 5 damage to 2 other characters on board. So definitely a card that, like, when this was first revealed, like, had some hype behind it, a lot of excitement. It's a really cool and unique ability in a lot of ways. Hasn't really found her feet so far, but I think Mufasa is definitely the best place for her. her. So great to see. We are also running 4 copies of that Flynn Rider that I alluded to earlier that a lot of Ruby Amethyst decks taking advantage of. 2 cost Inkable, 2/2, quest for 1, and at the start of your turn, if you have a character in play with more strength than each opposing character, gain 3 lore. Just Mother Gothel is a great character to put next to this with the 3 strength. For like a lot of decks, they're not going to be able to outpace you necessarily in that, especially if they're more of a mid to late game deck. But really just in the late game when we've got something down like a Maui or a Hydra, one of our higher static characters, even a Medusa potentially can be enough. This Flynn Rider is going to demand a response, or you're just going to really run away with lore. We talked about these draw cards. We've got 2 copies of Hades. When you play this character, return a character from your discard to your hand. I really like Hades in a deck like this that goes through a lot of characters. I'm actually kind of surprised not to see a Chernobog in here. Would like to see it, but I like to see Hades. 4 Rapunzel we talked about. This is like our main source of draw. We're running 4 copies of Super Goof. 4 cost Inkable, 2/4, quest for 1, rush, and Super Peanut powers. Whenever this character challenges another character, gain 2 lore. So just like can really help close gaps. Not all opponents are going to see it coming because Goofy isn't seeing a lot of play. And 2 strength isn't huge, but hey, sometimes it's just going to be the last bit that you need, or sometimes it's not even about taking out the character. It's just the 2 lore gain, and with 4 willpower, you should expect to survive a healthy amount of the time. So yeah, love to see it. And we've talked about all this high end. 2 copies of Maleficent. I like 4. Just maximize these Mufasa high roll odds. But yeah, really glad to see Mufasa do well. Yeah, I hope this becomes a pattern. I think this deck really struggles against Ruby Sapphire, which is a shame and probably why I don't think I don't expect we'll see it a lot. But I'm a big fan of Mufasa, so I hope so. So congratulations to Jeffrey. And then also in top 8 running some Ruby Amber Mufasa, we have Steven making a lot of the same choices. They are making room for a Sisu line. They got 2 copies of the Daring Visitor to pop off characters 1 strength or less, 2 copies of the Emboldened Warrior to help us have a nice early high statted character, and 2 copies of the Empowered Sibling, which again, not only do we have a shift line, hitting this off of Mufasa should feel pretty good. We got the Flynn Rider in here as well to generate lore. No Plutos, no Docs, but we're seeing 3 copies of the Gaston. Also running 2 copies of Beast Wounded, 3 cost Inkable, 2/6, quest for 2, and this character enters play with 4 damage. So everything I just said about Mother Gothel and Mulan and how they help to get Rapunzel online, this is another character that's just going to help us get that online more often than not. And 2/6 is a nice stat line, and questing for 2, and 3 is really nice and cheap. Similar mid-range here. We've got the 4 Goofy, 4 Medusa, no Tremaine in here. We've got 2 copies of the Elite Archer Mulan to go with our 1-drops. We are seeing 4 copies of the Carefree Surfer Stitch, 7 cost Inkable, 4/8. Beautiful stat line out of Medusa, out of Zeus. I say that all the time, but it's important to take note of. Quest for 2, and when you play this character, if you have 2 or more other characters in play, you may draw 2 cards. You'll never catch me running Mufasa without Stitch and Rapunzel until the deck gets something else that is more reliable draw. I'm a big fan of this. We are seeing the 1 Chernobog here, 10 cost uninkable, 9/9, quest for 3. You pay 1 less ink for him for each character you have in your discard, and when you do play him, all those characters in your discard go back into your deck, and this is a deck that like goes through characters very quickly, so this should be online quickly. And again, if you can recycle your Mufasas, your Rapunzels, your Gastons, your Maleficents, that is going to feel really good. And Steven also opting for Brawl to be their non-character card of choice, which I think is just, again, for Diablo, if nothing else, is just a really good shout. So yeah, great to see Mufasa represented in this tournament with a couple of people leading it to top 8. And that's it for both sets of top 8 deck lists. Really sorry about the camera. I will definitely hopefully fix that before next video, because this camera was a lot of money. I imagine it's a problem with Streamlabs as opposed to the actual camera, but I'll get that sorted for next time. But yeah, other than that, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. If you're brand new to the channel, please subscribe for all things Lorcana. Hit that like button to show your support, and we'll see you soon.